The morning sun painted the waters of the Mississippi River a deep gold as the small wooden skiff cut across the tranquil surface. Sitting in the bow, Anna Mae Jenkins watched the surrounding green immensity, breathing the humid, dense air of the swampland. Her brown, calloused fingers gripped the edge of the boat firmly, as if fearing that reality might slip away if she loosened her hold. "Are we still far, Mr. Bow?" she asked, turning to the older man piloting the craft. "Not anymore, child. Another hour and we'll reach Baton Rouge." The old riverman smiled, revealing teeth stained yellow from chewing tobacco. "Anxiety won't make the river run faster." Anna Mae nodded and turned back to the landscape. At 25, she had never left her small bayou community. Her whole life had been dedicated to helping her parents on their modest cane sugar and pecan farm. But everything changed when she received the letter from Aunt Corinne, her mother's sister, who had left for Baton Rouge decades ago. "Come to Baton Rouge," the letter read. "I found you a position in the household of the Vance family of Belle Reve. They need someone trustworthy to manage the house, and I thought of you." The letter arrived at a crucial time. The annual flood had devastated the family's crop, and money was tighter than ever. Her parents, Silas and Alara, were reluctant at first, but finally agreed it would be an opportunity for Anna Mae. "The Vance family is the most important one in the whole region," commented Mr. Bow, interrupting her thoughts. "They say old Augustus Vance made his fortune with cotton plantations back before the war, then diversified, bought timberland, opened general stores. Today, his grandson Thomas runs it all. A powerful man." Anna Mae felt a chill run down her spine. She had never dealt with rich, powerful people. Her basic education, completed at the small community school, seemed insufficient for what was coming. And their house? "What's it like?" she asked, trying to imagine. "It's a palace, child. Sits up on the ridge, overlooking the delta. Gardens that never end, ballrooms, a pool. They say it has more rooms than a person can count." Mr. Bow paused. "But don't be dazzled. Rich folk cry too, just with silk handkerchiefs." The skiff continued cutting through the water, and gradually the landscape changed. The marsh began to give way to increasingly frequent dwellings, until finally they sighted the port of Baton Rouge. Anna Mae felt her heart accelerate. The movement of barges, people carrying goods, the sound of horns and loud voices, everything seemed too chaotic for senses accustomed to the quiet of the swamp. When they finally docked, Anna Mae picked up her small canvas bag and said goodbye to Mr. Bow with a tight hug. He was the last link to her former life, and now she would be alone in a completely unknown world. Following her aunt's instructions, she went to the town square where she was to wait for the Vance's driver. She sat on a bench under the shade of an old live oak and waited, observing the city's movement with curious and apprehensive eyes. After 20 minutes, a man in a uniform approached. "Miss Anna Mae Jenkins?" he asked formally. "Yes, that's me. I'm Charles, driver for the Vance family. I've come to fetch you. Please follow me." Anna Mae followed the man to a gleaming black sedan, so clean it reflected the sun's rays like a mirror. She had never been inside such an automobile. Charles opened the back door for her and stowed her bag in the trunk. The vehicle's interior was cool thanks to the air conditioning, another luxury Anna Mae knew only by hearsay. As the car drove through the streets of Baton Rouge, Anna Mae watched the people, the stores, the squares through the window. Everything seemed bigger, more colorful, more intense than in her small community. When they began climbing into a more wooded area, the houses grew larger, with high walls and ornate gates. "We're entering the Vance territory," Charles explained, watching her in the rearview mirror. "Most of these properties belong to the family, or those connected to them." Finally, after passing through an enormous wrought iron gate, they entered a property that looked more like a park. The gravel drive snaked through impeccably maintained gardens with century-old trees and beds of tropical flowers in full bloom. In the background, imposing like a monument, stood the mansion, a 3-story colonial-style structure, with wide verandas and a marble staircase leading to the main entrance. "My goodness," Anna Mae murmured, unable to hide her astonishment. "Impressive, isn't it?" Charles commented with a discreet smile. "It has that effect on people the first time." The car stopped in front of the staircase, and Charles opened the door for Anna Mae. Her legs trembled slightly when she stepped onto the Vance property. At the top of the stairs, a middle-aged woman awaited, dressed in a discreet, elegant uniform. Her gray hair was pulled back into a severe bun, but her face showed a warm smile. "Anna Mae! My, how you've grown!" exclaimed the woman, hurrying down the steps. "I'm your Aunt Corinne, The last time I saw you, you were 5 years old." The two women embraced, and Anna May felt a wave of relief at finally encountering a familiar face, even though her memories of her aunt were vague. "Let's go inside," Corinne invited. "Mrs. Clara wants to meet you before lunch, and then I'll show you your quarters." "Mrs. Clara?" Anna May asked as they climbed the staircase. "Clara Vance, widow of Mr. William Vance. She runs everything now, ever since he passed 3 years ago." Anna May nodded, trying to absorb all the information. Entering the mansion, she was greeted by an imposing entrance hall, with Italian marble flooring and a crystal chandelier that seemed to contain 1,000 captured stars. The walls were adorned with paintings that Anna May suspected were original works by famous artists, and the furniture looked like relics from other centuries. "The house has over 30 rooms," Corinne explained, noticing her niece's amazed gaze. "Besides the main family, it houses the permanent staff, myself as housekeeper, 3 maids, 2 butlers, 4 gardeners, 2 drivers, and 4 security guards. Your role will be to assist in managing all of this, serving as my assistant and eventual substitute." Anna May swallowed hard. The responsibility seemed too immense for someone with her limited experience. But before she could voice her concerns, they were interrupted by a tall man, about 30 years old, descending the main staircase with firm steps. "Aunt Corinne, Mama is looking for you." "Something about the Saturday dinner menu," the man said before noticing Anna May's presence. His dark brown eyes examined her with curiosity. "And this must be the new assistant." "Yes, Mr. Thomas, this is my niece, Anna May Jenkins." "Anna May, this is Thomas Vance, Mrs. Clara's eldest son." Anna May made a small, instinctive curtsy, unsure of how she should behave before a family member. "Welcome to Belle Reve," Thomas said, extending his hand in a surprisingly informal gesture. "I hope you settle in well here. My mother has high expectations for you." The touch of his hand caused a strange sensation in Anna May, something she had never experienced before. His eyes seemed to penetrate beyond her simple appearance, as if they could see something she didn't even know about herself. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best," she replied, lowering her gaze to hide the blush she felt rising on her face. "Just Thomas, please. Sir makes me feel like my father." He smiled briefly, and then addressed Corinne. "I'll be in the study if Mama needs me." As she watched him walk away, Anna May couldn't help but notice the natural elegance with which he moved, the impeccable cut of his suit, the confidence in every gesture. He was a man born into privilege and carried that certainty in every atom of his being. "Come along," Corinne whispered, touching her arm lightly. "Mrs. Clara doesn't like to wait." As she followed her aunt through the mansion's ornate corridors, Anna May had the strange feeling that she was entering not just a house, but a new chapter of her life. Something told her that the calm waters she had known until then were about to turn into turbulent rapids. What Anna May didn't know was that her arrival at the Vance mansion was not a matter of chance, but a carefully orchestrated plan spanning over 2 decades. A plan that was about to unveil secrets that would forever change the destiny of 2 families. The Vance mansion's library was a sanctuary of knowledge and luxury. Floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves housed rare books and first editions. The Delta evening light filtered through the tall windows, casting golden patterns on the Persian rug. Sitting in a leather armchair, Clara Vance observed Anna May with the penetrating gaze of someone who had spent a lifetime assessing people. "So you are Corinne's niece," the matriarch said, her voice holding the authority of someone who never needed to shout to be obeyed. "I hope you have inherited your aunt's competence." "I will do my best not to disappoint you, ma'am," Anna May replied, keeping her hands clasped in her lap to hide their tremor. Clara possessed an austere beauty that the years had not diminished. Her gray hair was impeccably arranged in an elegant updo, and her navy blue silk dress accentuated her aristocratic posture. Her eyes, however, were what impressed the most, the same dark brown shade as Thomas's, but with a calculating coldness that her son did not possess. "Corinne tells me you have only a basic education," Clara continued, serving herself tea in a Chinese porcelain cup. "Normally, that would be insufficient for the position, but I trust her. Judgment. Furthermore, people without formal education often compensate with loyalty and discretion. Am I right? I may not have diplomas, Mrs. Vance, but I learn quickly and I know the value of trust," Anna May replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. An almost imperceptible smile touched Clara's lips. "Very well, you will start tomorrow. Corinne will teach you everything you need to know. But keep in mind, Anna May, this house has rules. The first and most important The affairs of the Vance family remain within these walls. I understand perfectly, ma'am. Excellent. And one more thing. My daughter Vivian returns from New York next week. She is sensitive. You will need to treat her with special attention. Corinne, who had remained silently by the door until then, cleared her throat softly. If you'll excuse us, Mrs. Vance, perhaps it's best to show Anna May her quarters now. She's had a long journey. Of course, Corinne. Clara made a gesture dismissing them. Until dinner, Anna May, punctually at 8. Leaving the library, Anna May quietly released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Corinne gave her a compassionate smile as she guided her through the mansion's corridors. You handled yourself well, her aunt commented. Mrs. Clara can seem intimidating, but she is fair. Earn her trust and you'll have stability for life. Anna May merely nodded, still processing the encounter. As they walked, her aunt showed her the main rooms, the formal dining room with a table for 20, the music room with a Steinway grand piano, the winter gardens, the sitting rooms. The wealth displayed in every detail was almost oppressive for someone who had grown up with only the essentials. And these are the family's rooms, Corinne explained, indicating a corridor on the second floor. The master suite belongs to Mrs. Clara. Next door, the room that was Mr. Williams, kept intact since his passing. Then we have Thomas's room, and at the end of the hall, Vivian's. And where is my room? Anna May asked. In the staff wing, of course. But don't worry. As my assistant, you'll have one of the best rooms on the staff. They followed another corridor until they reached a simpler area, although still luxurious by Anna May's standards. Her room was spacious, with a single bed, wardrobe, desk, and a small armchair by the window that offered a view of the side gardens. I hope it's suitable, Corinne said. The bathroom is shared with Rosa, the floor maid, but she's very tidy. It's perfect. Aunt, much more than I'm used to. After Corinne left to supervise dinner preparations, Anna May sat on the bed, trying to absorb all the changes of the last few hours. Everything seemed unreal. The mansion, the luxuries, the Vance family, especially Thomas, with those eyes that seemed to see right through her. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Opening it, she found a young woman about her age, wearing the housemaid's uniform. Hi, I'm Rosa, the girl introduced herself with a friendly smile. I came to see if you need help unpacking. Nice to meet you, Rosa. I actually have very little, but I welcome the company. As Anna May organized her simple clothes in the spacious wardrobe, Rosa told her about the house routine and the peculiarities of its inhabitants. Mrs. Clara always wakes at 6, has breakfast alone on the veranda, and then spends the morning in the study. Thomas is almost always away, managing the businesses, but when he's home, he usually stays in the study or the library. He's reserved but polite. And Vivian? What is she like? Anna May asked, curious about the daughter Clara had described as sensitive. Rosa's expression shifted subtly. Vivian is complicated. She was admitted to a clinic in New York for almost a year. Depression, they say, after her fiancé broke off the engagement. But there are rumors. Rosa lowered her voice as if the walls might listen. They say she tried to... She made a significant gesture with her hand. I see, Anna May murmured, understanding the implication. But don't worry. New staff rarely have much contact with Vivian. She lives in her own world. After Rosa left, Anna May took a quick shower and put on her best outfit, a simple but well-maintained light blue dress. Looking at herself in the mirror, she had the sudden awareness of how out of place she looked in that environment. Her straight black hair, though clean and combed, didn't have the worked-over shine of expensive salons. Her hands, despite being clean, showed the calluses from farm work. Her dress, even being the best she owned, looked like a rag compared to the clothes she had seen Clara wear. When the clock struck 7:50, Anna May went down for dinner. The smaller dining room, used for everyday meals, still comfortably seated 10 people. The table was set with porcelain, crystal, and silver, and lit candles gave the room a soft, elegant luminosity. Clara was already seated at the head wearing another dress, this one a shade of burgundy that highlighted her fair complexion. Thomas arrived moments after Anna May, having exchanged his day suit for a blue dress shirt and dark trousers. Good evening. Mama, he greeted, lightly kissing Clara's forehead, before noticing Anna May. Ah, good evening. Anna May, I hope you're settling in well. Yes, thank you. Everyone has been very kind, she replied, feeling uncomfortable under his gaze. Sit down, Anna May, Clara instructed. In the Vance family, trusted staff share our table. It's a tradition started by my father-in-law. Anna May took the indicated seat to the right of Thomas and across from an empty chair. Vivian won't be joining us tonight? Thomas asked, serving himself wine. Vivian is in New York, dear. She returns next week, as I informed Anna May this afternoon. Ah, yes. With all the traveling, I lose track of where everyone is. Corinne personally supervised the service, while two maids brought the dishes, a chilled shrimp and avocado salad as a starter, followed by redfish etouffee with herbs, and finally pecan pie for dessert. Everything was served with a formality that made Anna May feel even more out of place, watching carefully which utensil she should use at each moment. The conversation during dinner revolved mainly around the family business, the rising pecan exports, problems with one of the cargo ships, the new line of natural cosmetics they plan to launch. And you, Anna May? Thomas asked suddenly. What do you think of our little family enterprise? The question caught her by surprise. I don't know if I can comment, considering I just arrived, but it seems like an impressive business, especially for valuing products from our region. Thomas smiled, seeming genuinely interested in her answer. And you know the swamp products well, I imagine. You grew up in, where was it? The community of Bayou St. Jude. Small, about 4 hours upriver from here. We mainly farm cane sugar and pecans. Interesting, Clara commented, although her tone suggested otherwise. Perhaps your local knowledge could be useful to our businesses eventually. Thomas is always looking for new perspectives. In fact, Thomas added, we're expanding our organic product line. Your insight on traditional farming methods could be valuable. Thomas's interest seemed sincere, and Anna May felt less tense. It would be a pleasure to contribute however I can. After dinner, Clara retired to her rooms, leaving Thomas and Anna May momentarily alone in the corridor. Don't be intimidated by the luxury and the formalities, he said in a lower, more intimate tone. Underneath it all, we're just people. Very different people, Anna May responded, unable to contain the observation. Thomas laughed, a soft and pleasant sound. Appearances can be deceiving, Anna May. Sometimes the biggest differences are where we least expect them, and the greatest similarities hidden beneath layers of circumstance. Before she could reply, they were interrupted by Corinne, who came down the hall. Anna May, could you help me with the pantry inventory? We can start your training now. Of course, Aunt. Turning back to Thomas, she gave a small nod. Good night, sir. I mean Thomas. Good night, Anna May, he replied, with a smile that was etched in her memory long after she went to bed. In the following 2 weeks, Anna May immersed herself in the mansion's routine. Under Corinne's guidance, she learned the intricate details of administration, from controlling the stock of food and cleaning supplies to supervising staff schedules and organizing the family's frequent social events. Her contact with Clara was formal and limited to morning meetings to discuss the day's activities. Thomas, however, despite spending most of his time away from the mansion, sought her company whenever he was home, asking questions about her life in the Bayou community, her opinions on books, lending her volumes from the library, and sharing stories from his business trips. One Sunday afternoon, while the house was quiet with most of the staff off, Anna May took the opportunity to explore the gardens. Hidden behind a hedgerow, she discovered a small gazebo surrounded by wisteria. She sat on the wooden bench, enjoying the view of the river in the distance and the rare moment of solitude. It's my favorite refuge, too, a masculine voice said behind her, making her jump. Thomas approached, dressed in casual clothes, a white linen shirt and dark trousers. Sorry if I startled you. I didn't know anyone came here. Few know this spot. My grandfather built it for my grandmother, who loved wisteria. He sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. I found a few books I think you'll like. Left them in your room. Thank you. I'm really enjoying our conversations about literature. Me too. He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. You know, Anna May, I have the strangest feeling that we've known each other for much longer. Anna May felt her heart race. What do you mean? I can't explain it. There's something about you that seems familiar, as if our paths have crossed before. Before Anna May could respond, they heard Corinne's voice calling her. I have to go, she said, quickly standing up. Anna May, Thomas called as she was already walking away. Vivian arrives tomorrow. I just wanted you to know. That night, Anna May had trouble sleeping. Thomas's words echoed in her mind. There was something about the way he looked at her, as if he really could see beyond her simple appearance. And why did he specifically warn her about Vivian's arrival? Was there some hidden meaning in it? She woke up the next morning with a strange unease. While helping Corinne with preparations for Vivian's arrival, she noticed an unusual agitation among the staff. Everyone seems nervous about Vivian coming back, she commented to Rosa as they arranged fresh flowers in Clara's daughter's room. She can be unpredictable, Rosa replied, adjusting the curtains. Demanding 1 minute, completely apathetic the next. And since she returned from the clinic, she's had episodes of temper that frighten even Mrs. Clara. Anna May absorbed the information in silence, arranging the white lilies in the crystal vase, Vivian's favorite flowers according to Corinne. As she tidied the petals, her gaze fell upon a framed photograph on the bedside table. Vivian, as a teenager, next to a young Thomas and a middle-aged man she presumed to be the late William. Something in the image captured her attention. Vivian's eyes, identical to Thomas's and Clara's, that peculiar shade of dark brown that looked almost golden under a certain light. And then, like a lightning bolt, the memory surfaced, her mother's old locket, kept in the small wooden box at home, containing the faded photograph of a young man with precisely the same gaze. The black Mercedes-Benz crossed the mansion gates exactly at 3 p.m, a punctuality that Anna May had already learned was a trademark of the Vance family. From her bedroom window she watched as Charles opened the car door, and a slender woman with brown hair stepped gracefully out of the back. Vivian Vance had arrived. Clara and Thomas awaited her at the top of the staircase. Even from a distance, Anna May could perceive the tension in the matriarch's shoulders. The hug between mother and daughter seemed formal, almost rehearsed. Thomas, however, wrapped his sister in a warm embrace, lifting her off the ground for a moment. Anna May, Corinne's voice startled her. Mrs. Clara has requested your presence in the blue parlor in half an hour to formally introduce you to Miss Vivian. I'll be there, Anna May replied, stepping away from the window. She felt an inexplicable anxiety about meeting Vivian, especially after the strange connection she had perceived in the photograph. 30 minutes later, Anna May entered the blue parlor, so named for its navy blue and gold decor. Vivian was sitting on a sofa, a glass of wine in her hands despite the early hour. Standing by the fireplace, Clara maintained her impeccable posture, while Thomas observed the scene from a more distant corner, leaning against a bookshelf. Ah, here she is, Clara announced. Vivian, this is Anna May Jenkins, Corinne's niece and our new administrative assistant. Anna May made a slight curtsy. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Vivian. Vivian studied her with a penetrating, analytical gaze that resembled Clara's, but there was something more, a feverish, almost disturbing intensity. She was undeniably beautiful, with the same aristocratic features as Thomas, but her beauty had a fragile quality like fine porcelain on the verge of breaking. So you're Mama's new protege, Vivian finally said, her voice surprisingly melodious. Interesting. You don't look like Corinne at all. Vivian, Clara warned gently. What? I'm just observing. Vivian took a sip of wine. In fact, you remind me of someone. Don't you think so, Thomas? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. I don't know who you're referring to, Vivian. An enigmatic smile touched Vivian's lips. No? I thought you would have noticed too. That chin, the shape of the eyes. She left the sentence incomplete, savoring the tension she had created. Anna May will be available to help you settle back in, Clara intervened, changing the subject. Whatever you need, you can turn to her. How kind of you, Mama, to assign someone especially for me. Do you not trust me to take care of myself after a whole year at the clinic? The tone was light, but the words carried a subtle venom. It's merely courtesy, Vivian. Nothing more. Of course. Vivian turned her attention back to Anna May. And where do you come from, Anna May Jenkins? A bayou community a few hours upriver from here, Bayou St. Jude. A river girl, Vivian murmured with a sudden genuine interest. It must be fascinating to grow up like that, free from social constraints, from expectations. Tell me about your family. My parents are farmers. We have a small cane sugar farm and harvest pecans. A simple life, but an honest one. And your mother? What's her name? Alara. Alara, Vivian repeated, as if savoring the name. And has she always lived in Bayou St. Jude? No. She came from the city when she was young, after she met my father. Something flashed in Vivian's eyes. Recognition. Triumph? But it was so quick that Anna May wasn't sure. Fascinating. We'll have to talk more about this. Vivian stood up in a fluid movement. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to rest. The trip was exhausting. After Vivian left, an uncomfortable silence hung in the air. Clara seemed lost in thought, her face an impenetrable mask. "She seems well," Thomas finally commented. "Better than in the last visits?" "Yes," Clara agreed, though her tone lacked conviction. "Anna May, you may leave. I have matters to discuss with Thomas." "Excuse me," Anna May murmured, exiting the parlor. However, instead of walking away, something compelled her to remain close, hidden behind the slightly ajar door. She knew it was wrong, but the conversation seemed somehow connected to her. "Did you see how she reacted?" Clara's voice was clear despite the low tone. "We shouldn't have brought her here. It's too risky." "It was your idea, Mama," Thomas replied. "You insisted when Corinne mentioned her niece. I didn't know it would be so evident. What did you expect? That there would be no resemblance at all?" "I expected it to be subtle enough to go unnoticed. Vivian is too observant for her own good." A pause. "We need to be careful. If Vivian starts connecting the dots..." "Do you really think she doesn't know, after all this time?" "If she knew for sure, she would have used it against us by now." "No, she suspects, but she has no proof, and we need to keep it that way." Anna May moved away silently, her heart pounding. What were they talking about? What dots could Vivian connect? And why did her presence in the house seem to be part of some plan of Clara's? In the following days, Anna May noticed a subtle shift in the mansion's atmosphere. Vivian watched her constantly with an interest that fluctuated between genuine curiosity and something darker. Clara, on the other hand, seemed to avoid being alone with her, delegating more and more responsibilities to Corinne. Only Thomas maintained the same attitude, friendly, attentive, always seeking her company when he was home. Their conversations became the highlight of Anna May's days, moments where she could temporarily forget the mysteries surrounding her. One particularly hot afternoon, while organizing the mail in the study, Anna May was surprised by Vivian. "Always working?" Clara's daughter commented, walking in without knocking. She wore a light summer dress that accentuated her thinness. "Mama must be delighted with your dedication." "It's my job, Miss Vivian." "Please, just Vivian. I hate formalities." She walked around the study, her fingers gliding over the furniture as if looking for dust. "You and Thomas have become close." It wasn't a question, but Anna May felt she needed to answer. "Steno wa santi, o wanada na fai." "Mr. Thomas has been very kind." "I'm sure he has." Vivian smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My brother always had a weakness for lost causes. With all due respect, I don't consider myself a lost cause." "No?" Vivian tilted her head, studying her. "A river girl, no formal education, no connections, working for one of the most powerful families in the Delta. What do you call that?" Anna May remained silent, refusing to be provoked. "Do you know what's most interesting about you, Anna May Jenkins?" Vivian continued. "It's that you don't truly belong anywhere. Not to your Bayou world anymore, but certainly not to ours. A soul in limbo." She moved closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Or maybe I'm the one who's wrong. Maybe you belong to this world more than you realize." A shiver ran down Anna May's spine. "I don't understand what you mean, don't you?" Vivian opened a desk drawer, casually rummaging through papers. "Have you ever asked your mother about your father?" "Your real father? My father is Silas Jenkins." "Is he really?" Vivian took something from the drawer, a small envelope, and put it in her pocket before Anna May could see what it was. "It's fascinating how easily we accept the stories we're told in childhood. Have you never questioned why you don't look anything like the honest Silas?" Anna May felt her blood run cold. It was true that she didn't have her father's dark skin and Native American features, having inherited her mother's fairer complexion and almond-shaped eyes, but she had never questioned it. Many children didn't resemble their fathers. "You're trying to confuse me, Miss Vivian." "I don't know why, but it won't work." Vivian laughed, a crystalline sound that contradicted the tension of the moment. "I'm not trying to confuse you, Anna May. I'm trying to open your eyes. You and I have more in common than you imagine." Before Anna May could reply, Corinne appeared at the door. "Anna May, Mrs. Clara needs the inventory report." "Vivian, your mother was looking for you." Vivian cast one last enigmatic look at Anna May. "We'll continue our conversation another day." "River girl." After Vivian left, Anna May stood still, trying to process what had just happened. "Don't listen to her," Corinne advised, approaching. "Vivian always liked to play mind games with people. It's part of her problem. But why me? We barely know each other." Corinne hesitated, as if carefully measuring her words. "Vivian has a special ability to detect vulnerabilities. And you, my dear, are new here, still adjusting. That makes you an easy target." The explanation made sense, but it didn't calm the unrest Anna May felt. Vivian's words had touched a sensitive spot she didn't even know existed. That night, during dinner, Vivian was strangely silent, almost cordial. Clara and Thomas maintained a conversation about business, while Anna May tried to concentrate on her food, avoiding Vivian's gaze. "I received an interesting call today," Vivian announced suddenly, interrupting the conversation about the new pecan processing plant. "From Father's lawyer." Clara put down her cutlery slowly. "And what did Mr. Gabriel want?" "Apparently, there are some clauses in Father's will that haven't been executed yet. Clauses that even you, Mama, didn't know about." "What kind of clauses?" Thomas asked, frowning. "Related to beneficiaries not publicly acknowledged." Vivian looked directly at Anna May. "Isn't it fascinating how secrets always find a way to come to light?" "Vivian, I don't think this is an appropriate topic for dinner," Clara said, her voice taut as a violin string about to snap. "Why not? We're all family here." Vivian smiled sweetly. "Or almost all." "Enough!" Thomas slammed his fist on the table, startling everyone. "If you have something to say, Vivian, say it directly. Otherwise, respect our mother's table." Vivian leaned back in her chair, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. "I just thought we should be transparent about family matters, especially considering the recent developments." The rest of the dinner proceeded in a heavy silence, broken only by forced comments about the food or the weather. Anna May felt the weight of everyone's eyes, Vivian with her malicious satisfaction, Clara with her poorly concealed worry, Thomas with an intensity she couldn't decipher. Later, in her room, Anna May couldn't sleep. Vivian's insinuations echoed in her mind, along with fragments of the conversation she had overheard between Clara and Thomas. There was something about her, some connection to this family that she didn't know. A light knock on the door startled her. Opening it, she found Rosa looking nervous. "Mr. Thomas asked you to meet him at the gazebo," the maid whispered. "He said it's important. Now? It's nearly 11 at night." He sounded urgent. "Said no one can know." Anna May hesitated. Part of her said not to go, that it could be dangerous. But another, stronger part needed answers. "Thank you, Rosa." She put a light coat over her nightgown and quietly went down the back stairs, avoiding the main corridors. The night was clear, with a full moon illuminating the gardens in shades of silver. The path to the gazebo never seemed so long, every shadow cast by the trees making her heart race. When she finally arrived, she found Thomas standing, looking out at the river. Hearing her steps, he turned quickly. "You came," he said, the relief evident in his voice. "I wasn't sure you would. What's going on, Thomas? Why all the mystery?" He approached, his face serious in the moonlight. "Vivian is right, Anna May. There are things about you, about your family that you don't know. Things my mother has been trying to hide for years." Anna May felt her legs weaken. "What things?" "You'd better sit down." Anna May obeyed, sitting on the gazebo bench. Thomas remained standing, as if physical proximity might make what he was about to reveal more difficult. "My father, William Vance, frequently visited the rural Delta communities, overseeing the company's social projects. That was more than 25 years ago." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "On one of those trips, he met a young woman named Alara." Her mother's name on his lips made Anna May freeze. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying, Anna May. I'm telling you directly. My father and your mother had a relationship. Brief, but significant enough to have consequences." "No." Anna May shook her head in denial. "My father is Silas. He always has been. Silas met your mother when she was already 2 months pregnant. He accepted her, accepted you, gave you a name and a home. For that, I have enormous respect for him." Anna May stood up, her head spinning. "How do you know this? How can you be so sure?" "Because my father confessed everything to my mother before he passed away. Remorse consumed him for years. And because—" Thomas hesitated, looking her directly in the eyes. "Because you have his eyes, Anna May. The Vance eyes. The same eyes Vivian noticed the moment she saw you." The pieces began to fall into place. Clara's sudden interest in bringing her to the mansion, Vivian's observations, the whispered conversations. It all made terrifying sense. "So I am." Her voice failed. "My half-sister," Thomas completed, his voice mixing sadness and a strange tenderness. "And Vivian's." Anna May's world collapsed. Her whole identity, her whole history, everything she believed to be true, It crumbled like a sandcastle under the tide. Why did your mother bring me here? If she knew who I was, why want me nearby? That's the part I don't fully understand. But I know my mother. She never does anything without a calculated purpose. Thomas moved closer, gently touching her shoulder. The important thing now is that you know the truth. What you do with it is your choice. Anna May recoiled from his touch, unable to process so much information at once. I need to think. I need to be alone. I understand. But Anna May... He held her by the wrist when she turned to leave. Vivian recently discovered a clause in my father's will. A clause that acknowledges and provides for any child he may have had out of wedlock upon DNA proof. That would make you a legitimate heir to a considerable part of the Vance fortune. Do you think I'm upset because of money? Anna May pulled her arm away, freeing herself. I just found out that my entire life was built on a lie. That the man I called father for 25 years is not my biological father. And you're worried about money? No, I'm worried about you, Thomas replied, frustration evident in his voice. Vivian won't make things easy. She'll see you as a threat to her inheritance. And my mother, he sighed heavily. My mother will do whatever is necessary to protect the family name. And you? What do you want? Anna May asked, suddenly aware of the real question tormenting her. Thomas remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on hers. I want you to find your place, Anna May, whatever that may be, even if it's not beside me. The confession hung in the air between them, laden with implications Anna May was not ready to face. Without another word, she turned and ran back to the mansion, tears blurring her vision. In her haste, she didn't notice the figure hidden among the trees, Vivian, with an enigmatic smile on her lips and a small recorder in her hand. The rain fell relentlessly over Baton Rouge, turning the mansion gardens into muddy puddles and creating a curtain of water that isolated the property from the rest of the world. Anna May watched the drops stream down her bedroom window, reflecting on how completely her life had changed in just one night. 3 days had passed since Thomas's revelation at the gazebo. 3 days in which Anna May had barely left her room, claiming to be unwell. Corinne, worried, brought her meals that remained virtually untouched. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She only relived that conversation endlessly, trying to comprehend what it meant for her identity, her future, her understanding of who she was. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Anna May? It was Corinne's voice. May I come in? Yes, Aunt, she replied, moving away from the window. Corinne entered with a tray of tea and biscuits. Her usually serene face was marked by dark circles and wrinkles of worry. We need to talk, the housekeeper said, placing the tray on the bedside table. About what Thomas told you. Anna May turned sharply to her aunt. You knew? Corinne nodded slowly, the weight of guilt visible in her tired eyes. Your mother is my sister Anna May. Of course I knew. Why did you never tell me? Why live a lie for 25 years? Alara loves Silas deeply. When she met William, she was young, naive, enchanted by the rich, powerful man who promised her the world. Corinne sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped in her lap. William didn't tell her he was married, not until she found out she was pregnant. Then he offered her money to resolve the problem. Anna May felt her stomach churn. He wanted her to have an abortion? Your mother refused. But the scandal would have been devastating for the Vance reputation, so William demanded that she disappear. That's when Silas entered her life, a good man, who loved her despite everything and accepted you as his daughter. And you helped maintain that lie, to protect you, Anna May, to give you a chance to grow up far from the toxicity of this family. Corinne sighed deeply. When Clara approached me 2 months ago saying she wanted to bring you here to work, I was terrified. I tried to dissuade her, but what? But she had leverage. She threatened to expose everything, to destroy the peace your mother and Silas had so carefully built. She said if I didn't cooperate, she would send lawyers to the community. Anna May felt a wave of anger surge through her. Why now? Why after 25 years did Clara decide to bring me close? William's will, Corinne replied, confirming what Thomas had said. Shortly before he died, tormented by guilt, he included a clause recognizing any child he had outside of marriage. Clara kept it secret for years, but recently the family lawyer, Mr. Gabriel, began pushing for William's last wishes to be fulfilled. So she brought me here to... What? Keep me under control? Watch me? To assess you, to see if you posed a real threat to the empire she built. Corinne gently touched Anna May's arm. But I think something unexpected happened. She started seeing qualities in you that she admired. Thomas certainly did. Anna May felt her face burn at the thought of Thomas. The glances, the conversations, the growing closeness, everything now stained by the revelation of their kinship. And Vivian? Does she know? She suspected for a long time. Vivian has always been too perceptive for her own good. As a child, she found letters William had kept. Letters from your mother. The discovery devastated her, contributing to her emotional problems. Anna May absorbed the information in silence. So many lives affected by secrets and lies. So many years lost. "What should I do now, Aunt?" she finally asked, her voice small, almost childlike. "Only you can decide that, my dear. But know that regardless of the blood that runs in your veins, you are who you choose to be. Silas may not have given you life, but he gave you love, values, character, things no DNA test can quantify." After Corinne left, Anna May remained sitting on the bed for long minutes, processing everything she had learned. Finally, with renewed determination, she got up and changed her clothes. It was time to face the truth, however painful it might be. She went downstairs, determined to find Clara. In the corridor leading to the matriarch's study, she heard raised voices coming from the library. She approached silently, recognizing the voices of Vivian and Clara in a heated argument. "You can't just ignore it." Vivian's voice was laden with fury. "She has as much right to the inheritance as Thomas and I." "That is not for you to decide, Vivian," Clara replied, her tone cold in contrast to her daughter's heat. "Oh no? Perhaps I should take this to court then. I'm sure the papers would love the story. The illustrious William Vance and his affair with a river girl. The bastard daughter hidden for 2 decades. I can just imagine the headlines." "You wouldn't dare." "Don't test me, Mama. Not after everything you put me through." Vivian's voice dropped, becoming an almost venomous whisper. "You committed me to that clinic to silence me, so I wouldn't tell the world what kind of man Father really was. But now I have the living proof walking the halls of this house." Anna May backed away, shocked by the intensity of the hatred in Vivian's voice. Turning to leave, she ran straight into Thomas, who was apparently also listening to the conversation. "Come on," he whispered, gently guiding her by the arm to a nearby empty room, the small music room that was rarely used. "You shouldn't have heard that. Shouldn't have heard the truth?" Anna May retorted, more aggressively than she intended. "More secrets, Thomas? Don't you think enough is enough?" He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had learned indicated worry. "Vivian is out of control. She's always had emotional problems, but in the last few years," he let the sentence trail off. "She hates me, and she doesn't even know me. It's not you she hates, Anna May. It's what you represent." Thomas sat down at the piano, idly running his fingers over some keys. "Vivian adored our father. He was her hero, her protector. When she found out about his affair with your mother, something broke inside her. The perfect image she had of him was destroyed. And it's my fault? Of course not. But Vivian needs someone to blame, and you're the easiest target." He looked at her intently. "I'm afraid of what she might do." She mentioned taking the case to court, exposing everything. "It's possible. Vivian has always been unpredictable, but I've never seen her this determined." Thomas hesitated, as if measuring his next words. "There's something else you should know, something that complicates the situation even more." "What else could there be?" Anna May asked, exhausted by revelations. "The clause in my father's will doesn't just recognize you as a legitimate daughter. It specifically grants you majority control of the Vance Company shares." Anna May felt as if the floor had opened beneath her feet. "How is that possible? Why would my father do that?" Guilt, perhaps. Or maybe because, deep down, he knew Vivian didn't have the stability to manage the family fortune, and he feared I would follow in his footsteps in business, prioritizing profit above all else, including the Delta and its people. Thomas gently closed the piano lid. "Whatever the reason, the fact is that if you claim your legal rights, you will have more power over the Vance Empire than any of us." The magnitude of that revelation left her speechless. It wasn't just a matter of recognition, of identity. It was a massive transfer of power and wealth. "I don't want that," she finally said. "I never asked for any of this." "I know you didn't, and that's why my father must have trusted you." Thomas stood up, moving closer. "Anna May, regardless of what you decide to do, I want you to know that I'm on your side. Not for the company, not for the inheritance, but because—" He hesitated, the conflict visible in his eyes. "Because in such a short time, you've become important to me. In a way I shouldn't, given the circumstances. Anna May's heart raced. There was an admission in his words, a confession of the feelings that had also grown within her, feelings that were now complicated by the blood tie they discovered they shared. We can't, Thomas. Not after what we know now. I know. He stepped back slightly. Forgive me. I shouldn't have said anything. An uncomfortable silence hung between them, laden with possibilities that could never be explored. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Anna May finally asked. Honestly? I don't know. The Vance fortune is tempting, but it comes at a high price. Vivian will never accept it peacefully. My mother will fight with every weapon she has, and believe me, she has many. You'd be stepping into a war you didn't even know existed. What if I just leave? Go back home, pretend none of this happened? Thomas smiled sadly. They would come after you, one way or another. Some truths, once revealed, cannot be hidden again. The sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor interrupted the conversation. The door opened abruptly, and Corinne entered, her face pale. Anna May, you need to come with me. Now. What is it? Thomas asked, alarmed by the housekeeper's expression. Silas and Ilara are here. At the front entrance. Anna May felt her blood run cold. My parents? Here? How? Vivian, Corinne replied, her voice trembling. She contacted them, told them everything. They took the first boat to Baton Rouge. Without waiting for more explanations, Anna May ran through the mansion corridors to the main entrance. Opening the door, she saw the scene she never thought she would witness. Her parents, or rather, her mother and the man who raised her as his daughter, standing in the light rain, looking small and out of place against the backdrop of the imposing Vance mansion. Mama! Papa! She cried, running to embrace them, oblivious to the rain that now wet her dress. Ilara returned the hug fiercely, tears mixing with the rainwater on her face. Silas, always so strong and unshakable, suddenly looked aged, the weight of the secrets visible in the new wrinkles marking his face. My daughter, he murmured, his voice choked. We came to get you. We're going home. How did you know? What did Vivian tell you? A young woman called, Ilara explained, pulling back slightly to look at her daughter's face. Said you found out the truth about your biological father. That they were trying to buy your silence, keep you here against your will. That's not true. I came here to work by choice. She said they would say that? Silas interjected, his gaze hard. Said they put ideas in your head, that they were manipulating you to claim an inheritance and abandon your real family. Anna May felt a wave of fury against Vivian. Her manipulation had no limits. Now she was trying to use her own parents against her. None of that is true, she said firmly. Yes, I discovered that William Vance was my biological father, but you, Silas Jenkins, will always be my real father. The man who raised me, who taught me to walk, to fish, to be a good person. Silas's eyes welled up with tears, something Anna May had never seen happen. He pulled her into a tight hug, his solid body trembling slightly. You don't know what it means to hear that, daughter. I think I do, Papa, because it means the same to me to say it. When they separated from the embrace, Anna May noticed that Thomas and Corinne had approached and were observing the scene from a distance. Clara had also appeared, standing at the top of the staircase, her face an impenetrable mask. And, behind her, Vivian, a triumphant smile on her lips. Please come in, Anna May invited. We can't talk here in the rain. Ilara and Silas exchanged apprehensive looks. It was obvious they felt intimidated by the mansion's grandeur and the presence of the Vances. Maybe we should go to town, Silas suggested. We can talk somewhere neutral. No, Clara intervened, descending the stairs with her characteristic elegance. Her gaze swept over the visitors, lingering longest on Ilara. You are welcome in my house. We have much to discuss, and I prefer it to be in private. The tension in the air was palpable as the group headed to the sitting room. Anna May could feel the weight of the historic moment, the two families finally face to face, decades of secrets about to be exposed. In the sitting room, Clara took the initiative, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Ilara, it's been a long time. You haven't changed as much as I expected. Neither have you, Clara, Anna May's mother replied, surprising her daughter with the familiarity with which she addressed the Vance matriarch. You know each other? Anna May asked, confused. Your mother worked here in this house as a maid before you were born, Clara explained. That's how she met William. The revelation hit Anna May like a punch. One more piece of the puzzle fell into place. One more secret came to light. Why did you never tell me, Mama? Well, what should I have said, daughter? That I was seduced by the master of the house? That I ran away pregnant and ashamed? Alara looked directly at Clara. It wasn't just for my sake that I kept the secret. It was an agreement. William gave me money to start over far away, and in return, I promised never to reveal that the child I was expecting was his. An agreement you kept for 25 years, Thomas observed, admiration in his voice, even with all the financial difficulties you faced. It wasn't for money that I kept the secret, Alara retorted, pride in her voice. It was to protect my daughter, to give her a normal life, far from this world of ambition and intrigue. Vivian, who had been observing the scene with apparent disinterest, let out a cynical laugh. How noble of you. And now, are you still going to protect her from her rightful inheritance? Or are you finally going to admit that all this time you were just waiting for the right moment to claim what is rightfully hers? Vivian! Clara warned severely. What? I'm just saying what everyone is thinking. Vivian stood up, pacing the room like a predator circling its prey. Let's be honest, no one here really cares about Anna May. You, Mama, just want to avoid scandal. Thomas wants to do the right thing. As always, the eternal knight in shining armor. And you two, she cast a disdainful look at Alara and Silas. You built an entire life on a lie. What kind of foundation is that for a family? Enough, Vivian! Thomas stood up, confronting his sister. It's not for you to decide what constitutes a family. Look at them. They raised Anna May with love, gave her values you would never understand. That is family. How naive you are, little brother. Vivian moved closer to him, challenging, always believing the best in people. But do you know what I learned at the clinic? That everyone has a price. Everyone can be bought, manipulated, broken. She turned back to Anna May. Even our dear little river girl sister. I'm not like you. Vivian, Anna May replied, maintaining her composure despite the provocation. I don't see the world through your distorted lens. No? Then why don't you ask your mother about the money William deposited monthly into her account all those years? Why don't you ask about the letters they exchanged even after your birth? Anna May turned to her mother, interrogation in her eyes. Alara lowered her gaze, silently confirming Vivian's accusation. He insisted, Alara murmured. Said it was the least he could do. I used the money for your schooling, Anna May, for the medicine when Silas got sick. It was never for me. See? Vivian smiled victoriously. Everyone has their price. That changes nothing, Silas interjected, speaking for the first time since they entered the room. His voice, though soft, carried a natural authority that made everyone turn to him. I knew about the money from the start. I knew about William, about everything. And I chose to love Anna May as my daughter anyway. Not for money, not out of obligation, but because it was the right thing to do. His simple, yet powerful words created a reflective silence in the room. Even Vivian seemed momentarily without a response. Clara took advantage of the pause to regain control of the situation. I believe there is a way to resolve this that is fair to all involved. Anna May has legitimate rights according to William's will. We cannot, and do not want to, deny that. Wait, Anna May interrupted. Before we discuss any agreement, I need time. Time to process all this, to decide what I truly want. Time is a luxury we don't have, Clara responded. The will clause stipulates a deadline. If not claimed within 30 days after the identification of a legitimate heir, the rights expire. And who set that deadline? Who decided I was identified? The family lawyer, Mr. Gabriel, presented the official documentation 3 weeks ago when Vivian discovered your existence and pushed for the execution of the clause. Clara sighed heavily. That's why I brought you here, Anna May. Not just to meet you, but to prepare you for this responsibility before it was too late. Anna May looked around the room, at her mother and Silas, visibly uncomfortable in that opulent setting, at Corinne, torn between her loyalties, at Thomas, whose eyes reflected genuine concern, at Vivian, whose bitterness seemed to consume any possibility of reconciliation, and finally at Clara, the matriarch whose motivations remained an enigma. I need air, Anna May said, abruptly standing up. Excuse me. Without waiting for a response, she went out onto the veranda, ignoring Thomas's calls. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and humid. She took a deep breath, trying to order her tumultuous thoughts. For her whole life, she had known only one reality, the simplicity of Bayou life, the daily struggle for survival, the unconditional love of her parents. Now, suddenly, she was the heiress to one of the Delta's greatest fortunes, the daughter of a man she had never known. part of a family whose complexities and ambitions were completely foreign to her. And then there was Thomas, the half-brother for whom she had developed feelings that now seemed impossible, forbidden. The attraction she had felt since their first meeting now explained by a blood connection that made any romantic possibility unthinkable. Looking up at the sky that was beginning to clear after the storm, Anna May understood that she was facing the most important decision of her life, a decision that would affect not only her future, but that of two entire families. The Delta always had its own rhythm, its own way of dealing with transformations. The river waters rose and fell, the seasons alternated between deluge and dry spell, and the swampland constantly renewed itself. Perhaps that's why, Anna May thought as she watched the sunrise the next day. The people raised in that environment learned to adapt, to find balance even in the greatest adversities. She hadn't slept. After the stormy meeting between the two families, her parents had stayed at a small hotel in the city, politely declining Clara's offer to remain at the mansion. Anna May preferred to stay. She needed space to think, to process all the revelations and decide her next step. Now, sitting on her bedroom veranda, she watched the first fishing boat cut through the waters, gilded by the rising sun. Life continued its course, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding on its banks. A knock on the door interrupted her contemplation. It was Rosa, the maid, bringing a breakfast tray. "Mrs. Clara asked me to let you know the family lawyer will arrive in an hour," Rosa informed her, placing the tray on the table. "Everyone will meet in the main study." "Thank you, Rosa." After the maid left, Anna May barely touched the food. A lawyer. That meant decisions would be made today, documents would be signed, lives would be permanently altered. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant dress Corinne had given her. Looking at herself in the mirror, she realized how much she had changed since arriving at the mansion. Not just in appearance, although her hair was now better cut, her posture straighter, her clothes more refined. The deepest change was in her eyes, which now carried the weight of knowledge, responsibility, and impossible choices. When she went down to the study, she found the others already gathered. Her parents had returned, sitting uncomfortably in a corner. Clara occupied the main chair behind the imposing mahogany desk. Thomas was standing by the window, while Vivian leaned against the side sofa, feigning disinterest despite the evident tension in her posture. And there was a man Anna May didn't know, tall, middle-aged, impeccably dressed in a dark suit. She presumed it was Mr. Gabriel, the lawyer. "Good morning, Anna May," Clara greeted formally. "This is Mr. Gabriel Mendonça, the family lawyer, for over 3 decades. He is here to guide us on the legal matters regarding William's will." Gabriel slightly inclined his head in greeting. "Miss Anna May, it's a pleasure to finally meet you." "Finally?" Anna May questioned. "Did you know about me before?" "William confided in me when we drafted the clause that benefits you," the lawyer explained. "He always intended to publicly recognize you one day, but—" He hesitated, casting a quick glance at Clara. "Circumstances were never favorable." "You mean my mother never allowed it?" Vivian interjected with a bitter smile. Gabriel ignored the comment, opening his document folder. "I am here today because we need to formalize the situation. The deadline stipulated in the will for claiming the rights expires in precisely 1 week. Miss Anna May, you must decide whether or not you wish to accept your inheritance." "And what exactly does this inheritance include?" Silas asked, his voice firm despite the intimidating environment. "According to the specific terms left by William Vance," Gabriel adjusted his glasses, reading directly from the document. "His biological daughter, now identified as Anna May Jenkins, is entitled to 1/3 of the total ownership of the Vance companies, including voting rights on corporate decisions, the summer home in coastal Carolina, a trust fund valued at approximately $50 million, and a seat on the board of the Vance Foundation for Sustainable Delta Development." The silence that followed was almost palpable. The magnitude of the fortune mentioned was incomprehensible to Anna May and her parents. "There is also," Gabriel continued, "a personal letter that William left to be delivered to his daughter, should she be found." He took a time-yellowed envelope from the folder, sealed with the Vance crest. He approached and handed it to Anna May, who received it with trembling hands. "There is one more thing that everyone should know," the lawyer added, turning back to the group. "The clause has an additional condition, one that William insisted on keeping confidential until this moment. What condition? Clara asked, frowning. For Anna May to receive her inheritance, she must assume the presidency of the Vance Foundation for a minimum period of 5 years. During this time, she will have authority over all the family's socio-environmental projects in the Delta region. The revelation dropped like a bomb in the room. Vivian stood up abruptly, her face contorted in fury. That's absurd. She has no qualifications, no experience. It was your father's expressed wish, Gabriel replied calmly. He believed that someone with Anna May's roots in the local community would bring a valuable perspective to the foundation. Or maybe he just wanted his precious bastard close. Making up for 25 years of absence, Vivian spat. Vivian, enough! Clara's voice cut through the air like a whip. Respect your father's memory. Anna May remained silent, the envelope heavy in her hands like lead. Everyone watched her, awaiting a reaction, a decision. I need to read this first, she finally said, holding up the envelope. Mictus, alone, Clara nodded. Use the study. We will be in the sitting room when you are ready. When everyone had left, Anna May sat in the chair Clara had occupied, aware of the irony of that position of power so new to her. Carefully, she opened the envelope and removed 2 sheets of paper, a handwritten letter and what appeared to be an old photograph. The handwriting was elegant, masculine, decisive. The letter was dated a few months before William's death. My dearest daughter, it began. If you are reading these words, it means we have finally found each other, even if I may no longer be present. There is so much I wish I could tell you, so much I would like to explain, but I know that words on paper cannot make up for 25 years of absence. First, I must ask for your forgiveness, not for conceiving you, as I will never regret that, but for not having the courage to recognize you publicly, to confront social conventions and my own wife to give you the name that was rightfully yours. I met your mother, Ilara, when she worked in our house. She was an extraordinary young woman, intelligent, determined, with an intuitive understanding of the swamplands and its people that fascinated me. Our relationship was brief but genuine. When she told me she was expecting a child, my first impulse was happiness. But then reality set in. The scandal, the threat to the Vance reputation, Clara's reaction. I offered the most cowardly solution. Money for her to disappear. Ilara refused my initial offer, but eventually accepted a monthly stipend, not for herself, but for you. Over the years, we maintained discreet contact. She would send me photographs of you, tell me about your progress in school, your abilities, your character. Through her letters, I came to know the extraordinary young woman you became, even from afar. The decision to include you in my will was not taken lightly. I watched the empire I built from afar, the impact of our companies on the Delta, and I began to question the legacy I would leave. Vivian, my adored daughter, has undeniable brilliance, but also a worrying emotional instability. Thomas has his heart in the right place, but I fear he is easily influenced by his mother. You, on the other hand, grew up among the river people. You understand their needs. You respect the land. That is why I entrust you with not only a material part of my inheritance, but the responsibility for the foundation, the project I consider my true legacy. Do not take this decision lightly. Accepting it will mean entering a world of power and privilege, but also of intrigue and crushing responsibilities. Refusing it would be equally understandable, remaining in the simple, honest life that Ilara and Silas, to whom I will be eternally grateful, provided for you. Whatever your choice, know that, in my imperfect way, I always loved you. Your father, William Vance. Alongside the letter was an old photograph. William, younger, holding a baby in his arms. On the back, written by hand, Anna May, 3 months. The only time I held her. Silent tears streamed down Anna May's face. The photo had been taken in secret, probably during some clandestine visit. She had no memory of that moment, that man, that brief contact with her biological father. For long minutes, she remained still, absorbing the weight of those revelations. Finally, she put the letter and the photo back in the envelope and went out in search of the others. In the sitting room, the tension was palpable. Vivian was pacing like a caged animal. Thomas was speaking quietly with Ilara and Silas, apparently trying to reassure them. Clara observed the scene with her usual impenetrable expression. When Anna May entered, all eyes turned to her. I have made my decision, she announced, her voice firmer than it had ever been. And what is it? Gabriel asked, pen in hand, ready to record her answer. I accept my inheritance, she declared, causing a visible jolt in Vivian. but with my own conditions. Conditions? Gabriel frowned. The will already sets the terms. Yes, but I set mine to accept them, Anna May replied with surprising calmness. First, I want half of the trust fund to be immediately transferred to a sustainable development project in Bayou St. Jude and other rural Delta communities. That's absurd, Vivian exclaimed. She hasn't even taken the inheritance and she already wants to give away half of it. It's my right, Anna May firmly countered. Second, I will assume the presidency of the foundation as stipulated, but I want Thomas as co-president with equal decision-making power. Thomas looked genuinely surprised. Anna May, you don't have to do that. I want you by my side, Thomas. Your business experience complements my community knowledge. Together, we can do more than separately. And finally, Anna May continued, turning to Vivian, I want you, Vivian, to assume the communications director position for the foundation. An astonished silence followed the declaration. Vivian, who was ready for another furious attack, was momentarily speechless. Why? She finally asked, suspicious. Why would you give me any power after everything I've done? Because you are brilliant, articulate, and despite everything, you care about your father's legacy. By channeling your energy into something constructive, you can make the difference he always expected of you. Vivian studied Anna May's face, looking for signs of manipulation or falsehood. Finding none, she leaned back on the sofa, apparently reconsidering her position. And what about the mansion? Clara asked, speaking for the first time. And the company shares? The mansion remains yours, as it always has been, Anna May replied. As for the shares, I will retain my voting rights but will delegate the daily management to Thomas, provided he commits to sustainable and ethical practices. Thomas nodded. You have my word. Gabriel made quick notes. I must say, these are unusual terms but legally viable. I can draft an agreement that addresses all these conditions. There is one more thing, Anna May added. I want my parents, Alara and Silas, to be officially recognized as consultants to the Foundation for matters related to the Bayou communities, with adequate salary and real power of influence on decisions. Clara stood up, approaching Anna May with an expression difficult to read. For a tense moment, everyone awaited her reaction. You truly are William's daughter, she finally said, an almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. You have the same unsettling combination of idealism and pragmatism that always fascinated me about him. She formally extended her hand. I accept your terms, Anna May Vance Jenkins. Welcome to the family. The handshake sealed a new chapter in the history of the two families. It was not a storybook happy ending. There was still much mistrust, deep hurt, and painful adjustments ahead, but it was a beginning, a commitment between worlds that seemed irreconcilable. In the months that followed, the transition was not easy. Vivian, after initial resistance, surprisingly embraced her new role with dedication, channeling her intelligence into creating impactful communication campaigns for the Foundation. Her relationship with Anna May remained complex, a mix of residual resentment and growing mutual respect. Clara, ever the strategist, quickly adapted her public narrative to present Anna May as an example of the Vance's commitment to the Delta communities. Behind the scenes, she remained reserved, but gradually allowed small barriers to fall, especially as she witnessed Anna May's genuine dedication to the social projects. Alara and Silas chose to remain in Bayou St. Jude, overseeing the new development projects implemented by Anna May. Monthly, they visited Baton Rouge for Foundation meetings, occasions when the full family gathered, moments that were still tense, but progressively more natural. As for Thomas and Anna May, the bond that had formed between them transformed into a deep partnership, based on mutual respect and shared goals. The initial romantic feelings, made impossible by the revelation of their kinship, gradually gave way to a genuine sibling connection. No less intense, just different. A year after the revelation that changed everything, Anna May was once again in the gazebo where Thomas had told her the truth about her origins. The sun was setting over the river, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The Delta continued its eternal cycle, indifferent to human dramas, but now under the influence of more sustainable policies led by the renewed Vance Foundation. I thought I would find you here, Thomas said, approaching with 2 glasses of praline liqueur, a tradition they had established to celebrate small victories. We're approving the new project today, Anna May replied, accepting the glass. I thought it was appropriate to come back to where it all began. The Roots Project was the new management's most ambitious initiative, a program that combined environmental preservation, education, and sustainable economic development for rural communities throughout the Delta region. "William would be proud," Thomas commented, sitting beside her. "Do you really think so?" "I'm certain of it. You transformed his legacy into something greater than he ever imagined." They silently toasted the sunset. Anna May reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her there, from the simplicity of Bayou St. Jude to the complexity of the Vance world, from the daughter of farmers to the heiress of an empire, from the girl who thought she knew her roots to the woman who discovered that identity is something we build daily with our choices, not just with our blood. "Do you know what surprised me the most this year?" she asked, watching a solitary barge sail in the distance. "Vivian not trying to poison you?" Thomas joked. Anna May laughed. "Besides that, it surprised me to realize that I belong to both worlds, not needing to choose between them. For so long I felt divided, as if accepting to be a Vance meant betraying my Delta origins. And now? Now I understand that it is precisely these two inheritances that allow me to build bridges where before there were only chasms. William's blood in my veins gives me access to resources and power, but the upbringing I received from Alara and Silas taught me to use that power with wisdom and compassion." Thomas smiled, proud of the transformation he had witnessed in Anna May. "For someone who said she had no formal education, you've become quite the philosopher. I learned from the best school, life." She watched the last ray of sun disappear on the horizon, giving way to the first stars. "And my most important lesson was that sometimes the biggest storms bring the most necessary transformations." As night fell over the Vance mansion, enveloping the gazebo in soft shadows, Anna May felt a peace she hadn't experienced since arriving in Baton Rouge. It wasn't the end of her journey. In many ways, it was just the beginning. There were still challenges ahead, old wounds to heal, new paths to tread. But for the first time, she felt truly complete, embracing all parts of who she was. The river continued its eternal course. The waters flowing now were not the same as yesterday's, just as she was no longer the same Anna May who had arrived apprehensively at that mansion. Like the river, she had transformed, finding her own way between the banks of the past and the future, carrying in her waters the memories of where she came from and the promise of where she could go. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Anna May Jenkins' story has touched your hearts. Her journey between two worlds reminds us that our identity is shaped not just by our blood, but by our daily choices and the bonds we build. To continue navigating equally emotional stories, we have prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking the link to the left of the screen. If this narrative stirred emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexities of American life in its multiple facets. Share in the comments what the most striking moment of this story was for you, and what other narratives you would like to hear on our channel. Thank you for navigating the waters of this moving story with us.